I've been looking at the Tao Te Ching recently. I've got 5 translations open and I've been trying to reconcile them. So I've got the D.C. Lau, the classic translation here, and then on my computer I've also got Derek Lin, which is a good translation that I would recommend. Very simple translation where he has matched every character in the Chinese to an actual character or to an actual word in the English. There's a good one by a duo whose last names are Feng and English. That's a very good one. And I've also got a couple old ones, Arthur Whaley and Lega. I think it's James Lega or something, who was one of the first ones. One of the first people to make a translation into English. So the thing I'm finding is some lines are really easy to translate. Or shall I say, there's a lot of agreement between the translations. And so so it's very quick. And other lines are very, very hard to reconcile between. It's like what they've got written is completely different and sometimes actually directly contradictory. But I've got the first 4, so I want to just go through the first 4 little poems or sections of the thing and kind of just show you what it's like to go through this. So I think the best for this first line, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the unchanging Tao. Might be a good. I see. I've written Tao here and Wei over here, although they're synonyms. So I'll go back and change Wei. That should just say Tao. So yeah, the choice of spoken of seems to be the. I'm kind of just guessing a lot of the time here, but unchanging. A lot of people say the Tao that can be spoken of is not the real Tao, or the Tao that can be. The way that can be named is not the real way, I think is the common way this is said. It seems like it's more accurate to say that the way that can be spoken of is not the unchanging way, which is interesting. There's all this emphasis on constant, unvarying, unchanging, eternal. They're not saying real. It's not that it's not the real way. It's that it's not the unchanging way. That's kind of interesting. What does that mean? I don't know. The Tao most of them had to do with talking about it. One translation had trodden. The way that can be, followed, I guess, which is sort of a bleak outlook. Maybe it has another meaning, but it's like you're not going to succeed in following it no matter what. First line in the book, but the way that I think it's most of them emphasize spoken of. The name that can be named is not the unchanging name. So this one was more consistent. The name that can be named is not the unchanging name. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting, this concept of names. Naming things is kind of reminds me of Jordan Peterson. That it's the word, it's articulating things, or there's something about giving a name to something that makes it real, and there's a lot of talk about categorizing things. Like in the next one, talk about these different categories, the way things are separated into categories, and how we kind of do that by names. So there's probably more to explore there that I haven't quite thought about yet. So now the nameless was the origin of heaven and earth. That's actually a fairly consistent line, or conceived of as nameless. It was the origin of heaven and earth. One translation said that, but the nameless, whether it's actually, is there one thing that's called the nameless and one thing that's called named? Or is there only one thing that can be looked at as being nameless or named? And if you look at it as nameless, it's the origin of heaven and earth. And looked at as named, it's the mother of the myriad creatures, or the myriad things. This is myriad, I think, means 10,000. So the named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Chuang Tzu talks about the 10,000 things a lot, but this is Lao Tzu. So the nameless was the origin of heaven and earth. So what was the origin of heaven and earth? The Tao? The named was the mother of the 10,000 things. What does that mean? So the mother, it's kind of like the origin. Is it the same idea? It's the origin of the 10,000 things. So heaven and earth came from one thing that's nameless, and the 10,000 things are distinct from heaven and earth. They're in heaven and earth, and they came from something that was named. What does this mean? I'm just guessing here. So then the next one is, the idea is, if you're free from desire, you observe its secrets. You observe its mysteries. You observe its wonders. If you're filled with desire, you see its manifestations or its outcomes or its outer fringe, the superficial level of it. What does this say? Some frame this. Oh yeah, so then DC Lao actually says, always allow yourself to have desires in order to observe its manifestations. So is it a bad thing if you have desire and you're only seeing its manifestations, outcomes, and outer fringe? I don't know if it's a bad thing. Is it a bad thing? But this is the first sense of actual advice that he's giving here. The first ones are statements about reality, but it's not actually. You can't put any of this really put any of this into practice, right? But here, constantly free from desire, one observes. So he's telling you, if you want to observe the secrets and the mysteries and wonders, you have to be free from desire. Well, at least it's a hint. It doesn't spell out for you what it means to be free from desire. But it's something to think about. So these two issue from the same source. Which two? Is it being free from desire and being filled with desire? Or is it the nameless and the named? What is issuing from the same source here? Or is it both? DC Lao says these two actually are the same, which kind of makes sense if you say, so they issue from the same source but differ in name. It's like, well, okay, if they just issue from the same source, like things with different names can issue from the same source. So it's not really saying anything that they differ in name. But if they actually are the same, then it's kind of saying something. But they've got two different names, but they're the same thing. So maybe it doesn't make so much sense. I kind of thought it made the most sense to think of it as they both issue from the same source. But then it's not, then why say they differ in name? It seems, is it the same? Is being free from desire and being filled with desire somehow the same, two aspects of the same thing? Is it impossible to be one and not the other? Are the nameless and the named just two aspects of the same thing? I mean, we had this earlier. Conceived of as nameless, it's the origin of heaven and earth. So one of the translations was emphasizing that conceived, how you conceive it makes a difference as to what it is. And I mean, there's no real answers. I guess it's just all kind of interpretation, and it's just poetry. It's just food for thought, and ultimately, you're not going to get your ultimate beliefs from a text anyway. This is just something to, it's just a springboard for your own reflections about reality and life. It's just a springboard for your own thoughts, for you to form your own beliefs. It's just ideas, it's just suggestions. And so you don't place Lao Tzu's head above your own. So you don't, so he's not spelling out for you what this means, and it's opaque. It's opaque. I think that's just a unavoidable fact about this text, is that we don't know exactly what it means. The best I've thought of is to read some of the earliest commentary you could get. Ancient Chinese commentary on Lao Tzu. Even then, it's an interpretation, and I read somewhere that even at the time it was written, people would have had different interpretations of the different lines, and a lot of the interpretations would have been oral traditions. And so, I don't know, what is the truth? The idea here is that there is a truth, and that Lao Tzu is saying is telling us the truth here. Lao Tzu knows the truth and is spelling it out, and we want to know the truth, right? And so it's like we're excited at the idea, what if this book actually contains truth? If it did, we'd want to know what it meant, because the more we know what it meant, the more we would know what the truth is. And so, I think that's probably, I think ultimately you have to form your own, you can't just read the truth in a book. You have to figure out for yourself what is true, and what you believe through your own reflections about life, through your own wisdom. You have to form your beliefs. And this book is just opaque. We're gonna run up against just some level of, like, we don't know what this meant. Reflect on it, meditate on it, see if it yields any interesting kind of way of looking at things. But I just, there might be just a certain bottom that you hit with when you're trying to dig, and it's like, okay, you can only get so far actually figuring out what this book means. Well, let's go forward. These two, either the pair of them are called mysteries, are called a mystery, or the fact that they're the same is a mystery, or the same mold that they issued from is called a mystery. Somehow, something about the two of them, something about their unity is a mystery. So someone says, this appears as darkness. So there's an example of one that's just completely different. Most of them are agreeing. Something about their unity, or the two of them together, their sameness, is called a mystery. But then here you've got, this appears as darkness. Darkness is kind of like mystery. It's probably the same word, but where'd you get that? Mystery upon mystery, the door to all secrets, or the door to all mystery. Darker than any mystery, the doorway, the gateway to the many mysteries, to the many secrets. So very mysterious. Yeah, you're right, Lao Tzu. Very mysterious. At least your writing is mysterious. The doorway to, so is this somewhere you'd want to be? Is this the doorway to all secrets? Is this like observing, like being free from desire? You observe its secrets? Is that what we want to do? Is that the goal here? Is to observe the secrets, to go through the doorway and observe the secrets? I don't know. Next one starts off with all this stuff about binaries. So there was either the suggestion that the whole world recognizes something as beautiful, and therefore, and once that happens, ugly things arise. Ugliness itself arises, or the idea of ugliness appears by calling something beautiful. The idea of ugliness, like you can't have an idea of beautiful without ugly, which seems to be sort of the riff that goes on here when you're trying to. But you could also say it's only because of the existence of some of the translations seem to emphasize it's only because of ugliness that people recognize what's beautiful. Maybe it's not the case that either one causal direction or the other. Maybe it's beautiful and ugly have to coexist by necessity as concepts. Maybe, wonder about this. And then I wonder about the utility of this, because this is, listening to Alan Watts when I was like 18 and 19, 20, he would talk about this as if it was, and it's like, why are they going on about this? What's the interest in this idea that you can't have one half of a binary without the other half? You can't have a positive end of a magnet without a negative end of a magnet. You can't have good without bad. Because the idea of good is kind of like not bad. It's like the opposite of bad. Because what you're actually proposing is not two things. You're not proposing goodness and badness. You're proposing a single dimension. There is this, things can be more good or more bad. Maybe some dimensions are binary, but you're not. These names, goodness is actually not a thing. Goodness doesn't exist. Goodness is just the label for one half of something that does exist, which is this binary between. Okay, my camera has been cutting out, so let's see if it keeps moving. The point is, goodness and badness are a binary. And then they've got all these binaries, being and non-being. It's actually nice the way like D.C. Lau says it. Something and nothing produce each other. The difficult and the easy complement each other. The long and the short offset each other. High and the low incline toward one another. Note and sound harmonize with each other. Before and after follow each other. And each one had a clear way of describing those things. And anyway, so then there's this concept of, so there's these ideas that this concept of the binary and how you can't have one half of the binary without the other, and I still don't know what the usefulness of that is. Maybe it has something to do with the way the human brain categorizes things. Categorization is important. Categorization is understanding something's use, right? Which is kind of like, so I'm sure that intersects with the Jordan Peterson stuff in some way. But anyway, there's this, I think this is ue, probably the word that they used here. The sage practices detached action, actionless action, no action. The sage keeps to the action that consists in taking no action. So it's this concept of no action. What is it? So that's going to come back. So that's a theme. We don't have to just understand that here, because that's a theme throughout this whole thing. No action. What does it mean? What do you mean don't do anything? Do nothing? And then the next one is no talking. Same idea. But then you could also interpret that as the sage teaches, but is able to teach just through his actions and doesn't need to speak. Or the teaching that the sage practices can't be spoken of in words. Because he's practicing the way, and it can't be spoken of, so the thing that he's practicing can't be transmitted by talking. So who knows what that means? Something about not talking. Although later the theme of not talking will come back. Although sometimes it's like just don't talk too much. Don't. So maybe he's not saying don't talk at all. Maybe he's not saying don't do anything. Just don't do too much. I don't know. So then the translations were really contradictory on this one, but it's somehow like the way or the sage works with things and gives rise to all the creatures, but it doesn't try to control it. So it works with, creates, works, and accomplishes the task. So it does things, I guess, and does things that give rise to and possibly even benefit the myriad creatures, but doesn't control them, possess them, take credit, or put a whole bunch of attention on the accomplishment. So here's another kind of like sort of concrete, and it's, getting towards concrete piece of advice. Like, don't try to control. Don't try to possess. Don't take credit. Don't put all this attention on your accomplishments. And then the idea is, because the sage or the way doesn't draw attention to their success, draw or dwell on it, good things happen. Something lasts forever. I don't know what the forever thing is, but it's good. In other words, not dwelling on your success and drawing tons of attention to your accomplishments causes good things to happen. Is kind of the idea. Okay, so there's some more. So you can actually kind of look at this and say, okay, what's it trying to say? Like, be free from desire and you'll observe the secrets of the Tao. Practice no action or actionless action, whatever that means. Keep something in mind about talking. Maybe you don't need to talk. Maybe it's not speaking. Maybe there's value in not speaking. That's something I've learned from my own life. There can be value in saying nothing. Definitely. Don't try to control. Don't try to possess. Don't try to take credit. Don't draw attention to your accomplishments. Things to think about. Starts to get to the sort of moral lessons of this one. All right, so the next one. 3 kind of associated things. Not to exalt virtuous or successful people will keep the people from squabbling. So I guess people have contention and competition, petty competition for recognition. And if you just don't recognize anybody, there won't be petty competition. I don't know. Maybe that's what that's saying. Not to value goods that are hard to obtain will keep people from becoming thieves, will prevent theft. Or you could think of it as not keeping goods that are hard to obtain will prevent thieves from breaking in. So just don't keep any goods that are hard to obtain in your house, and no thieves will have interest in it. Or as a society, don't value goods that are hard to obtain. And you won't have as many people in your society become thieves. Which is it? What was Lao Tzu trying to say? I think these translations are just saying different things. And I think probably ultimately it doesn't matter. The important question is not what is the text really saying. The important question is, just look at either of them. Are either of these true and useful for my life, for me finding my way through the world? Just use them as reflection. Is there some wisdom in that? In the idea that not keeping goods that are hard to obtain might prevent theft. Just think about it. Maybe not. Maybe it's not that useful to you. Maybe one interpretation is useful, the other one isn't, and it doesn't matter which one is which, or which one is the original, because it just matters what's useful to you. Okay, so not seeing desired things prevents your heart from being confused. The one thing I think about here is, if you don't keep sugar in your house, I find myself not craving sugar, but when somebody gives me cookies and there's just cookies on the counter, suddenly I need cookies, even though when there were no cookies around, I had no need for cookies. I didn't crave them. So there's something about that. That's something to think about. I kind of like this. The governance of the sage empties their hearts, or empties their minds, but fills their bellies, weakens their ambitions, but strengthens their bones. So there's this emphasis on the physical. Fill your belly, strengthen your bones. Don't get so caught up in your mind, your ambitions, or even your heart. I don't know what that means, to empty your heart, or why that would be good. The other thing to note here is the governance of the sage. A lot of this seems to be saying, what does the ideal emperor of China do? It seems to be like the idea here. That idea, I don't think we've had that yet, but that'll come back. Like the idea of it sometimes seems like, is this really advice for just common people, or is this what a ruler of a kingdom, especially an ancient Chinese kingdom, should do? Is this a guidebook for how to run an empire? Or is this something that actually has some wisdom for us common people? Open question. And you have to decide that for yourself by interacting with the text and seeing how useful it is to you and your thought process. Keep the people innocent of knowledge and free from desire, and those who scheme will not dare to act. You can read the alternate translations I've kind of put in there, and I don't know which one's right. That line doesn't stick with me as much. Practice no doing. There's the no doing again, and order will prevail. So practice no doing. Figure out what actionless action means. It's got to be referring to something. They talk about it over and over in this text, so there's got to be something that they're talking about. What is actionless action? Is it useful to us today? Probably there's a way it is. What is it? So maybe some clues from elsewhere in the text might help us figure out what actionless action means. All right, so this was the one I just did before this. I started making this video. The Tao is empty, like an empty vessel. Using it, you can use it without it being filled. Or D.C. Lao's is kind of intriguing. The way is empty, yet use will not drain it. So he actually switched the word from filled to empty. So it's opposite. It's contradictory, but most of them had something about the idea that the Tao is empty. You can use it without it needing to be filled. Deep, bottomless, unfathomable. It is like the source of the 10,000 things. Earlier it said that the nameless was the named was the mother of the myriad things. Is that the same thing? The Tao. Now the Tao is the Tao the named? I would think it's the nameless. A little weird contradiction there. Try to figure out what that means. Who knows? Probably just take this as poetry in the end. It's just poetry. Use it to fuel your own thought. So this is either advice or it's saying what the Tao does, but one way or the other, sharpness is blunted, or ought to be. knots are untangled, or ought to be. Glares are softened, or ought to be. This one was all over the board. Mixes the dusts, merges with dust, soothes the dust. Let your wheels run only along old ruts. Bring yourself into agreement with the obscurity of others. So there's all 5 translations there. I don't know what to make of that line. It is hard to see, right? Hard to see. But it exists forever and everywhere. Or you could say it's hard to see and it only seems as if it exists. I kind of like, it's hard to see, but it exists forever and everywhere. I don't know. These were a nice concordance on the lines here. I don't know whose son it is. Its image is the predecessor of God. Interesting. That's kind of like more sort of like of this sort of cosmic, because some of the stuff is sort of like advice. For how to live, and some of it is sort of like profound statements about the nature of reality, the Tao being the source of heaven and earth. The image of the Tao being the predecessor of God. It's an interesting image to have in your head, or a interesting notion, and I think the way to live with it is just to have it in your head, and not to try to figure out what it means. The important thing is just to have it in your head and ponder it, because it's a story, it's poetry, it's not meant to be spelled out for you. It's a beautiful thing. Be close to it. Think about it. Have it in your head. Know these stories well. Know this poetry well. And maybe you'll make a connection someday in some odd way that you didn't expect. But hold it in your head and think about it. These are beautiful ideas. The image of the predecessor of God. Just wondering, what were they talking about? Why were they writing this stuff? What were they talking about? Why did they find this so profound and important? Why did people worship this as a holy text? Why did people preserve this text? Why do people practice this religion? Why was this text preserved so long? Obviously, people thought there was some value in this writing here, in these ideas. Were they just kooky and wrong? Or is there something profound about this? There's only one way to really know, and it's to spend the time with the text and think about it and really give it a chance. And marinate. You need to marinate your mind in it. Spend the attention, spend the time thinking, reading it over and over again. Thinking about it, trying to draw connections, trying to figure out as much as you can, remembering the images, remembering the things that you couldn't figure out. Almost like just having all the stuff memorized and stored in your head somewhere. Just from spending the time patiently, in a very relaxed, no rush way, just gradually soaking in it. By reading and rereading and thinking and talking about it. Making videos, even making this video, I think, helped me engage with it. I will let you know. I will speak, probably, if I if I come to the conclusion that this is really profound, or if I have profound realizations. I do think it's just so interesting and ambitious. Kind of, it's attempting a complete cosmology. It means trying to tell you what the origin of heaven and earth is, and the mother of the 10,000, the myriad creatures, the mother of the 10,000 things. You know, the deepest of all mysteries. It's ambitious, and maybe it's not a total flop. Maybe there's some knowledge in here. Very few texts are preserved and exalted the way this one is. Why? I don't know. I'll do more thinking. Thank you for watching.